Hello everyone, this is Pet Crochets. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm finally getting around to doing the tutorial for the skirt I wore to the Stevie Nicks concert. This is going to be a layered or tiered maxi skirt. I used a nice shell stitch for the tiers and a mesh stitch for the underside. So I'm going to be showing you guys how you can kind of customize this. You can make this into a mini skirt or a midi skirt, and as always, it's going to be based on your measurements, so you can really make it your own. I absolutely love the way this skirt turned out. As some of you may know from my previous video, I only had a few days to crochet this entire outfit, so this is the pattern or design that I came up with right on a whim, and I actually ended up loving the way it came out. I'm so excited that I get to share this project with you guys. I have many more tutorials on the way. I know I took a little break, but I am back and I can't wait to share all of my other tutorials. So like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned. As always, I also want to thank everyone for all the support and for joining me on my crochet journey. Let's get started. For this tutorial, you can grab any size hook and yarn. I'm going to be using a 3.25mm hook and a weight 3 or DK weight yarn. We're going to begin with a slip knot, and we're going to be making foundation double crochet stitches, so you want to start with a chain up of 3. I'm going to be linking the video on how to do these foundation stitches. In my video, I also show you how to do the foundation half double crochet and the foundation single crochet stitches. You're going to keep making these foundation double crochet stitches until you reach your waist or your high hip measurement. For me, that was around 28 inches. And you also want to make sure that you end up having an odd number of these foundation stitches, just so that it's easier later. So this is what I have so far. This wraps around my high hip area, right around my hip bones. I didn't want it to be high-waisted for the skirt. I wanted my midriff area to show a little bit, so it's a little bit lower. Now, to join the two ends together, you're going to place your hook into the very first foundation double crochet stitch that you made and secure the two ends with a slip stitch. Before you secure the two ends, you just want to make sure that everything's aligned properly and that this waistband area isn't twisted. Okay, so now to start the second round, we're going to chain up 2 and turn our work. And into this very first stitch, we're going to be placing a double crochet. From here, we're just going to be doing double crochets into every single stitch all the way around. And I'll show you what to do when we reach the end and how to join the ends together. So I'll meet you at the end. Okay, I made it back around. To join this round together, you're going to place your hook into that very first double crochet and join the ends with a slip stitch. Round 3 is going to be the same. We're chaining 2, turning our work, and into every single stitch, we're going to be doing a double crochet. You're going to keep doing these double crochets, and once again, I'll show you how to end the round. To end the round, we're going to be placing our hook into that very first double crochet stitch and then joining the two ends with a slip stitch. Now, before we begin the next round, we're going to want to mark off the sides of our skirt so we know where to increase to accommodate for our hips. So you want to place your seam of the skirt in the direct center and take 2 stitch markers or bobby pins and just mark off the 2 sides of the skirt. Now you're just going to double crochet to the stitch marker, and into the stitch marker we're going to be placing 2 double crochets into that stitch for an increase. Once you place your 2 double crochets, you want to just put your stitch marker back into that last stitch you made, just so you know where to increase. Now we're going to double crochet to the other stitch marker and increase again by placing 2 double crochets into that stitch. And once we place our 2 double crochets, we're going to put our stitch marker right back. You're going to keep doing these increase double crochet rows until you reach your hip width. If you want more double crochet rows, you can alternate between no increase and increase rows so it's more gradual. You also want to make sure that you end up with a multiple 5 for our shell pattern row. Now for this next row, we're going to be doing a row of double crochet, no increases, but we're going to be double crocheting only into the front loops. We're only working into the front loops because this is going to leave the back loops behind when we go back to do that underneath mesh row to make the next tier for the skirt. So as you can see, it leaves the back loops behind. Here I am just finishing that row with the slip stitch. And now I'm ready to begin the shell stitch row. So you're going to chain 2 and turn your work. Here I'm switching out my hook for a bigger hook. This is a 4mm hook because I wanted the shell stitches to stand out a little bit more and be a little bit more spaced out and breezy. For the first shell stitch, we're going to be going to 3rd stitch from the chain. So we're skipping a stitch and we're not counting the stitch on the chain. We're now going to place 2 double crochets into that stitch. Now you're going to chain 1 and do 2 more double crochets into that very same stitch, and that will create this fan or shell-like effect. So that's 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Now you're going to skip a stitch and place 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So here's my first and here's my second double crochet. This is going to be the pattern. So once again, we're repeating the pattern. We're skipping a stitch. Into the next stitch, we're doing that shell stitch. So 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet. Once we have the shell stitch, we're going to skip a stitch and do a double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So basically it's a shell stitch separated by 2 double crochets, and you're going to do this all the way around. To join the ends together, place your hook into that very first double crochet you made and join with a slip stitch. This next round is going to be the same, so we're going to chain 2, turn our work, and we're starting off with a shell stitch. Now it's going to be easier, so you're just going to do the shell stitch in the center of the previous shell, so where that chain 1 space is. So 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets into the center of the previous shell. Now the pattern repeats itself, so you skip a stitch and you do 2 double crochets. You can see it a little bit easier, so you just place a double crochet into the top of those previous double crochet stitches. And then we're doing another shell stitch and going to continue this all the way around to the end. When you reach the end, you go into that very first double crochet stitch and join with a slip stitch. We're now going to start increasing, so we're going to chain 3 instead of 2 and turn our work. We're going to start off with a shell stitch like we've been doing. So 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets into the center of the previous shell stitch. Now previously we weren't doing a chain 1 when we went to do the next double crochet stitches, but now that we're doing an increase, we're going to chain 1 and then do our 2 double crochet stitches. And then now we're going to chain 1 again and do our shell stitch. So basically you're just chaining 1 in between the shell stitches and in between the 2 double crochet stitches. And that's slowly going to start increasing our layers, so it creates a more flowy effect rather than just being a straight down. It's going to be gradually increasing. When you get to the end, you're going to join the ends with a slip stitch by going into that second chain. Remember, we did a chain up of 3, so you're going to the middle of that chain and joining with a slip stitch. So you're going to continue doing these increased rows. Remember, it's a chain up of 3. And you want to take note of how many rows you do so you can repeat it for the next layers or the next tiers. However, you don't have to do it this way. You can kind of make it your own and make each tier a different length. You can make some of the layers shorter, some of them longer. It's really up to your preference and what look you're going for. You can also stop and make it kind of a mini skirt and make the layers shorter if you'd like. I think that would be really cute. Right here I measured about 6 inches, but I actually kept going until I had around 6.5 inches. To end the row, you're just going to do 1 extra chain, cut, and pull the yarn through to secure it. Now I'm going to show you how to do the next tier under. You want to start by turning your work inside out so we can get that back loop that we left behind from earlier. Remember, we were working into the front loop and we left that back loop behind. I'm going to grab the hook that I was using earlier, the 3.25mm hook. Now I'm going to find the seam and I'm going to pull my slip stitch through the stitch or the back loop stitch at the base of that seam, like so, and make sure it's nice and tight. Now I'm going to go into the next stitch and do a slip stitch just so that it's extra secure. From here I'm going to do a chain of 4. We're going to start doing mesh stitches. You're going to skip the first stitch, so the third stitch from the chain, you're going to do a double crochet. We're going to count the chain on our hook as a stitch, so we're not counting that first stitch. So we're skipping a stitch and into the next stitch, double crochet. Now you're going to chain up 1, skip a stitch, and into the next stitch, double crochet, and this is the pattern you're going to repeat for the mesh row. So you're going to chain up 1, skip a stitch, and double crochet. You're going to do this all the way to the end, and I'll show you how to join the round together. Now we made it back to the end, and you're going to join the ends with a slip stitch into the third chain. We did a chain up of 4, so the third chain should be around in the middle, and we're going to join the ends with a slip stitch. Now we're going to start again, so chain up 4, turn your work. I just switched back to the 4mm hook because I wanted to build these mesh rows up faster. So now we're just going to continue the pattern by double crocheting into the top of that double crochet stitch, chain 1, double crochet into the top of the next double crochet stitch. So the same pattern that we did previously. Here I'm just going to quickly show you what we're going to be doing for this underneath mesh portion of the skirt. Basically, we're going to be building up this mesh portion until it's about 1.5 to 2 inches before the end of this shell portion on the front of the skirt. Once we finish the mesh rows, we're going to do that double crochet row again to get the back loops, and then we're going to work on the shell rows. Now I'm going to show you how to do increases for the mesh rows. Doing the mesh stitch naturally just kind of tightens up the stitches, so it makes it a little tighter. So I decided to do increases to kind of loosen it up and fit around my hips and thighs. So you want to start off with a chain up of 2, turn your work, and into the very first stitch we're placing 2 double crochets. Now we're going to chain 1. And we're going to double crochet into the top of the next double crochet stitch. From here you just continue that mesh pattern of chain 1 and double crocheting into the top of the next double crochet stitch. For the last double crochet stitch, we're going to place 2 double crochets into the top of that double crochet stitch like we did in the beginning. To join the round together, you're going to join the ends with a slip stitch into the top of that chain 2. This is what it should look like. Now we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. We're going to skip a stitch and double crochet into the following stitch, chain 1 and double crochet into the top of that double crochet stitch, so we're not skipping a stitch. And now we continue the pattern again, so chain 1 and double crochet into the top of that double crochet stitch. When we get to the end, we're going to do a chain up of 1 and place our last double crochet into the top of that last double crochet stitch right before that chain. And then to join the round together, we're going to place a slip stitch into the top of that chain 2. I'm going to be linking the video that I used to learn how to increase with the mesh stitches, just in case that my instructions are not clear enough. I'll have the link in the description box below. Another great crocheter shared a video on how to do these mesh row increases. From here, you can determine whether or not you need to add more increase rows or just regular mesh rows. And you're going to keep going until you reach around 1.5 to 2 inches before the end of that shell stitch row. Remember that this is inside out, so this mesh row is going to be on the inside. You want to make sure that you have enough space before the end. So as you can see here, I actually didn't leave myself enough space, so I ended up going back and adding more shell rows. This is because we're going to be doing essentially 2 double crochet rows before we start the shell row in order to have that back loop. So I'm going to chain up 2, turn my work, and place a double crochet into the chain space, and then a double crochet into the top of the double crochet stitch. Basically, we're doing a double crochet into every single stitch. So 1 into the chain space and 1 into the top of the double crochet stitch, and you're going to do this all the way around. You also want to make sure that you count your stitches and that you have a multiple of 5. If you don't have a multiple of 5, you can add 2 stitches into the top of the double crochet stitches in order to kind of increase, and make sure that you have a multiple of 5. So just kind of count them up and see how many increases you need to do to get to that multiple of 5 for that shell row. For row 2, we're going to chain up 2 and turn our work, and we're going to be double crocheting into the front loops only. Once again, we're doing the front loops only because we're going to leave the back loops for the next layer. I'm just adding a stitch marker here so I know where the back loops are when I go back later to do the mesh row for the next layer of the skirt. Once I'm ready to do the shell portion of the skirt, I'm switching back to the 4mm hook. I'm going to chain up 2 and we're going to start the shell. So into the 3rd stitch from the hook, we're going to do the shell stitch. We're going to do 2 double crochets, chain 1, and do 2 more double crochets into the same stitch. Then you're going to skip a stitch, and we're going to do 2 double crochets into the next 2 stitches. You can kind of go back to the beginning of the video. This portion is going to be the same. So we're going to do 2 rows of no increases for the shell stitches, and then you're going to do as many rows as you did for that first layer of increasing shell stitch rows. This is what I mean by the skirt kind of repeats itself after this portion. So each layer is going to be the same as the previous layer. The only thing that's really going to change is going to be whether or not you increase or decrease between the layers. I'll be showing you guys next how to do decreases. So my skirt kind of goes inward a little bit, so it's wider at the top and it starts to narrow down as it goes towards my ankles. So I'll show you how I got that effect. If you don't want it to decrease, you can kind of just keep continuing from here and making the different layers like we did with this second layer. You're just going to repeat the same thing. So you're going to go into the back loop, do the mesh, and then do the double crochet rows and then start the shell rows after. Here I'm just going to show you how I did the decreases for my 3rd layer. So like we did earlier, I'm going to those back loops, pulling up a slip knot and securing the slip knot by putting a slip stitch into the very next stitch. Now previously we did a chain up of 4 and started the mesh row right away, but here I'm going to chain up 2 and do a row of double crochet. So I'm going to double crochet into the very next back loop, and then to decrease I'm going to double crochet 2 of those loops together. So in order to do that, you're going to put your hook in, pull up a loop, and without finishing the double crochet, you're going to go into the very next loop and then double crochet. So go through 3 loops and then the 2 loops on your hook. So you're double crocheting the 2 stitches together. And from here, you're just going to figure out how many times you want to decrease. So I believe I decreased after every couple of stitches. There was no rhyme or reason to how I did this. I kind of kept trying it on to see how much I wanted to decrease. From here, I just continue the pattern by doing the mesh rows. I'm not going to be doing any increase mesh rows because I already did my decreases and I want my skirt to kind of go inward. So I'm just doing regular no increase or decrease mesh rows, just regular mesh rows. And you're going to continue doing the mesh rows for the same amount of rows as you did for the previous layer. And you just repeat the pattern. So you do those 2 double crochet rows. One of those double crochet rows is going to be the front loop only. And then you do the shell rows and you keep doing this until it is your desired length. That's pretty much the blueprint for this skirt. So I did a total of 4 layers. That last layer, once again, I decreased again so that it kind of goes inwards and it is more narrow at my ankles. You can definitely make this pattern your own and kind of play around with how many layers you do, how long each layer is, how many shell rows you do, and see what fits your style the best. Now for the top portion, you can just make a belt or a strap and weave it through that top row. I decided to add an elastic band just so that it's extra secure, and I generally like the smooth look of the elastic band better. It's just preference for me. And I also wanted to add a belt on top of it, so I wanted it to kind of be seamless and have space for the belt. For the elastic, I just measured out a piece that's around 4 inches less than the width of the skirt folded in half, and sewed the ends together, and then turned the skirt inside out and just sewed the elastic on the top. And that was it. Now you're just going to weave in all your loose ends and you are done with your skirt. Okay guys, and here's the final product. I love the way this skirt turned out. When I knew I was going to the Stevie Nicks concert, I immediately thought of creating some sort of tiered or layered maxi skirt, and I knew that I wanted it to kind of taper in towards the bottom, and this is what I came up with. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. Please let me know if you try this skirt out or if you decide to make a mini or midi version of this skirt. I have a lot more tutorials on the way very soon, so please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned. Bye everyone, I'll see you in the next video.